Carolyn Dube here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm playing around on a gel plate using a stencil, and I'm going to share with you a technique that allows you to, in one single pull, get solid areas, areas that have pattern on it, and then also to the pattern of the stencil. Now, this stencil, by the way, is one of my newest releases from my latest collection over at StencilGirl Products called Overlapping Shapes. And about the middle of this video, you'll see what the inspiration was for creating these stencils. For this technique, you start out by putting the stencil directly on the gel plate, and then you dip your brayer into paint and start brayering it around. I like to use two colors for this, a light one and a dark one of the same color, because it just creates a really subtle effect in there, so that it's not just a solid one color on it. And as I'm brayering around, the colors will definitely blend together quite a bit. So do you have to dip your brayer into the paint and then put it on there? Absolutely not. There are no musts with this. This is gel printing. A little bit later in the video, I'll explain why it's advantageous for me to do it this way, and it might help you out too. When you've got all your paint on there, then it's time to take the print. You put the piece of paper on it, and then just use your hand to make sure you've got good contact between the paper and the paint. Leaving the stencil on the plate is what created these different looks on here. You see how some of it almost looks a little bit, almost like a woodcut, or has a little bit of extra pattern into it? That's all because that stencil was left there. Now, if you move quickly, if you lift up the stencil, there will be a ghost print that is fantastically fun on there. But it's such a thin layer of paint, it can dry very, very quickly. So make sure if you want to get that ghost print that you've got paper right there ready to go so you can get that paper on there to grab that up. And definitely make sure you've got good contact between the paper and the plate so that you can grab all the paint that you can. Now, because the stencil was removed for the ghost print, that's going to give this ghost print a very different look from the original one. Here, I'll show them to you side by side. So what happens if we bring in more colors, not just a light and a dark of the same color? Well, let's play around and see what happens. This stencil is from my newest collection called Overlapping Shapes from over at StencilGirlProducts.com. Now, this entire collection is an exploration of the idea that everything is connected, and it represents those moments and places where things overlap and the space that surrounds those points of intersection. So what got me thinking about things like this? Was it something deep and significant and meaningful? Nope, not at all. It was playing the game 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yep, that's what got me thinking about how things are connected, how things overlap, and how surprising it can be how easily things can get connected, or places where you didn't even realize there were connections. Well, now that this thing is loaded up with paint, it's time to get that paper on top of it. And I'm really making sure I've got good contact with my hand here between the paper and the paint because, well, if the paper and the paint don't touch, I'm definitely not going to get a print there. To get a print like this that has all that detail to it, there's something critical involved in the process that I haven't talked about yet. And that is the amount of paint that you're using. You see, if you put a ton of paint on here when you do this technique, your prints won't have as much detail to them. Now, this is a huge challenge for someone like me who likes to squirt a lot of paint out there on the plate. And for that reason, I use the palette for this technique. By having the paint already squirted out over there and I'm just dipping that brayer into it, that allows me to control the amount of paint far better than if I was squirting it directly onto the plate. To get the kind of prints that I like with this technique, my goal is to get it covered in paint, but not swimming in it. So it's getting a thin layer of paint over the stencil and the plate here, but not having big squishy puddles of it. And again, for me, that's really a challenge. When you're doing this technique, when you lift up your print, if you want a lot more of the detail from the stencil and it's not there, but you've got a whole bunch of paint on there, then try using less paint. Chances are with that, you've just used a bunch more paint than what you need for the look. And what if when you lift up that paper, if there's just not much there at all, not a lot of pattern or color or anything really came up, then that says that you might need to use more paint. So experiment around with getting more paint on the stencil before you put the paper on. Well, thanks so much for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, I'd so appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more of my videos, hit that subscribe button, and that way you'll know as soon as I've got a new one out. And if you'd like to see the entire collection of overlapping shape stencils, they're all available over at StencilGirlProducts.com. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.